Let's see.
Thank you for being here this morning. My name is Sharon Morgan. I am the Public Information Officer for the City of Kinston. Today's press release will provide information concerning the Hokie Shepherd cold case. Today's speakers will be the City of Kinston's Police Chief, Keith Boyette, and Major Brandon Turner. Also joining us is retired police detective, who was one of the lead investigators for this case. We anticipate this conference to last no longer than 20 minutes, followed by a 5 to 10 minute window for questions regarding this case. Thank you. Now I'll turn it over to Chief Boyette.
Good early afternoon, everyone. I want to thank everybody for being here. We don't normally hold news conferences, but I figured this would be a lot easier rather than doing 5 or 6 interviews. We just go ahead and get it all completed at one time. So again, thank you for being here. I am Keith Boyette. I am the police chief here in Kinston. Spelling my name is Keith, Goyett is my last name. I want to recognize the officers and staff members here that work for the Kinston Police Department. Some of them are in here right now, the ones who are on the street working. They're extremely dedicated, and I'm really thankful for what they do day in and day out. Also, I want to recognize the officers behind me. Major Brandon Turner will be speaking. I get done my brief notes, and then Sergeant Doug Connor and retired Detective Tommy Lewis. Detective Tommy Lewis worked this case right up until his retirement. I worked with Detective Lewis between 2006 and 2012 in our investigations division. There's not a year that went by where he would not get that case file out and go through it. So he was extremely dedicated. Whenever he retired in 2012, he mentioned to me, hey, whatever you do, make sure you continue to work on that Hokie Shepherd case. So what we've been doing every year since then. 2022, Detective Tommy Lewis called Major Turner, asking for a case update. At that point, Major Turner met with his investigations team, and here we are today. And I'll let Major Turner talk a little bit more here in a few minutes. He'll explain more of the case investigations. But for now, let's talk a little bit about Ms. Hokie Shepherd. Now, in 1985, I was in kindergarten, so I was not here. I was not an investigator. So a lot of what we've researched are people that we've talked to in the community, and a lot of the old police officers. When I got hired here in January of 2001, there were still some older officers that worked in the 90s and 80s. And this is one of those cases that, some cases are just different. I don't know how to explain it, but this was just a very horrific case. Ms. Shepherd was 62 years old at the time of her death. She was a retired school teacher, over 30 years at the Long County Public Schools. She touched a lot of lives for students. When she retired, she got into a lot of community service. She was a big part of the Big Brother, Big Sister program here in Little County. She served as a board member of the Kinston Credit Union. She was actually the secretary there. She was also very active in the NAACP. She actually served on the Kinston Police Department's review board. She believes strongly in community policing and accountability. When the murder took place in 1985, the investigators who worked that case actually interviewed a suspect. They had a strong suspect. But you have to remember, in 1985, DNA technology wasn't what it is today. Unfortunately, it took a while, but I am very pleased to announce that we do have a suspect today. Unfortunately, he has passed, and again, Major Turner will discuss that. Do want to thank a couple of departments, Kinston Police Department, the North Carolina State Bureau Investigation, and the FBI, as well as the investigators who worked this case over the 39-year period. There were over 100 interviews working this case. So at this time, I'm going to turn this over to Major Turner, and he'll give you more of a detailed information on the case.
Good morning. My name is Brandon Turner, B-R-A-N-D-O-N-T-U-R-N-E-R. I'm a major with the City of Kinston Police Department. I'm going to tell you about the case file, pretty much start to finish how everything played out, how it worked into our favor to be able to solve this case and bring some sense of closure to the families. So on Tuesday, January 8th, 1985, members of the Kinston Police Department responded to the 1100 block of East Castle Street. They were called there in reference to a obvious homicide that had taken place. Once officers arrived on scene, they found the victim, Miss Hokie Shepherd, who was 62 at the time. She was deceased in her hallway between her bedroom and bathroom. She was unclothed and had a gunshot wound, obvious gunshot wound to the head, as well as several stab wounds about her body. She was found by a lifelong friend, current boyfriend, that evening. Investigators immediately responded to the scene. They began conducting interviews and investigations. They determined that her 1983 Cadillac was stolen from her residence. They started following up with neighbors, other family members. There was a multitude of theories and a multitude of interviews and suspects and possible potential witnesses of the crime that were interviewed at the time. Some are still around today, some are not. But in either sense, the City of Kinston called in the State Bureau of Investigations, which was very routine back then, to assist with the investigation. That case led over to Greenville, where Greenville Police Department assisted in the investigation after the vehicle was recovered at the Sadie White Elementary School there in Greenville. And even after all these countless interviews and talking with individuals and talking with family members and trying to find a motive of why someone would want to do this to Ms. Shepherd, the case eventually grew cold. So then we fast forward, just as Chief Goulet said, the case has been reviewed multiple times throughout the years. And just by what I would like to refer to as divine intervention, retired Detective Tommy Lewis, who's a dear friend of mine, called me back in March of 2023. And he said, "Hey, do you mind looking into the Hokie Shepherd case?" I said, "Absolutely. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I'll be happy to look into it." Within 30 minutes of him making that phone call, I received a call from a company called Orthram. Orthram is a private lab that's used for DNA testing and sampling. And they use genealogy to map out family histories. Well, the gentleman that called me was named Walter Brown. He called and said, "Hey, we're holding a class in Pitt County. I'd like for some of your detectives to come to the class to kind of understand what we do." I said, "Well, I got you on the phone. Tell me about what you do." So they told me all about the genealogy portion of the crimes and how they test and things like that. So I said, "Well, I'm glad you brought this. I'm glad you called because I just had a phone call from a retired detective about a case where we have DNA and evidence." He reviewed the case with me. He was a retired NC SBI agent himself. He said the SBI was directly involved in this. We'll be happy to continue with the investigation and help you out. So, fast forward a little bit, we sent some DNA profiles into Orthram, who conducted the testing. They were able to match a DNA profile through a lot of resources. We were able to contact the Charlotte field office for the SBI, as well as the FBI, as well as the Baltimore field office for the FBI, who we conducted interviews with the family members of the suspect. And we're happy to say that on September 30th, 2024, we met with the DA's office, presented our evidence, and were able to identify the suspect as Thomas Williams Wade Jr. He was 28 at the time of the crime. He spent a considerable amount of time here in Kinston. In the 80s, he didn't have much interaction with law enforcement. Then his next interaction with law enforcement was in the early 90s in Granville County. He continued to reside in Granville County up to 2007, where he passed away. I've been in contact with his family as well as the victim's family to let them know where we stand as far as the case goes. But ultimately, if he was alive today, he would have been prosecuted for committing the crime that he committed against Miss Hokie Shepherd. He would have ultimately been charged with first-degree murder and forcible sexual offense, as well as larceny and murder. That is pretty much this entire case in a nutshell. Without going into every single interview and every single thing that we have, that's kind of where we're at. Get it back over to Chief Goyette for our closing remarks.
So I've been the police chief here for actually 2 years this month. Actually, the anniversary, 2 more days from now. So one of the first things we did, we identified 2 goals that we need to work on. Goal number 1 was working on building trust and legitimacy in our community, and 2, quelling violent crime in our community. 2 main things that we need to work on. And our police officers, our staff members here, they understand that standard and they're dedicated. And this case right here is a pure example of that. I know this was a long, long time ago, but they're dedicated, they're unwavering, and they're going to do whatever they have to do within the law to hold those accountable who commit crimes like this. Since 2017, the Kinston Police Department has solved 7 cold case unsolved murders, with this being the 7th, 4 in the past 2 years. Again, that's just goes to show you how dedicated that our officers are, as well as our investigators and all of our staff members. And we still have more cold cases. I encourage anybody with information to come forward and go to our website. We actually have a cold case icon up there. It's got detailed information on the cold cases that we have here in Kinston. I can assure the family members who are watching or reading this, whose loved one died in a different case and it's unsolved, I can assure those family members that we still work on those cases, and we're going to until they're solved. We take crime very, very seriously here in Kinston, and we always will. And we're going to keep on being a proactive law enforcement agency and building trust with our community members so we can work together, identify stakeholders, and solve crimes such as this one. At this time, that concludes the press conference. We do have time for a few questions if anybody has any. We're willing to answer what we can.
Is there a way you can ask Tom?
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Come on up. Come up here, Tom.
I can first get you to say your first and last name, so let me. Sorry.
It's Tommy Lewis. Tommylews.
And you talked about how you've worked this case for so many years. Talk to me about how you feel that it's finally closed.
One of the cases that really been solved. One case that I've talked to about. Something else. Yeah, I've got my work on it.
I have a question kind of separately. So moving forward, this was solved with genealogy. This is kind of a new tactic that people have been using. Is this going to change how you guys are going to start looking at your cold cases?
Absolutely. You know, we have evidence from our cold cases, and if it's a situation where where DNA is part of that evidence, if it's a sexual assault, something of that manner, that's something that we're actually working on right now. We're going to sit through all of our cases and go forward with that. Very, very pleased with the advancement of DNA.
Yeah, and throughout all the years, how many times has this case gone cold and been reopened? Is there?
So we never close murders or unsolved crime like that. We keep them open until they're closed. So I can tell you this particular case right here was in Detective Lewis's desk when I was an investigator from 2006 until he retired in 2012 when he handed it to me and I put it on somebody else's desk. So it's never been put away, so to speak.
Sorry. Quick question. I don't know if you touched on it. Did the victim and the suspect know each other by chance?
I'm going to refer that to Major Turner.
Yeah, so looking back at old interviews, Thomas Wade was actually interviewed as a suspect in the case. Chief Wade mentioned that Ms. Shepherd was a volunteer with the Board of Elections. So one of her goals in life is to get people registered to vote. And she actually met Mr. Wade for the first time at J.D. Connor's store, which is at 352 South Atkins Street. So she met him there, asked him if he was registered to vote. He said, no, I'm not registered to vote. A few days later, he came over to her house for the first time, where he admits in his interview that she showed him around the house, and when they questioned him about where you were that day, the day of the murder, he said that he was playing basketball and he was nowhere near the house. He blamed the murder actually on an AC repair man that Ms. Shepherd was somewhat frightened of. But yes, to answer your question, they did know each other in the past and they had met at least one time before.
With the murder happening so long ago, what were some of the challenges you guys ran into here in the present?
Sure, that's a great question. Really, a big challenge is a lot of the investigators are bad health or just no longer with us. We lost a retired police officer, I think a week or two ago, Detective who passed away. He was one of the main officers involved in this case. That was a big part of it right there. And again, lack of evidence, with back then, DNA was around, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is today. So, and also today you've got security cameras everywhere. You've got social media, you have cell phones. So it's a lot different today than what it was back then. Back then you had to really hit the streets, and if somebody didn't come forward and wasn't a witness, or if you didn't catch them, it was very, very difficult. They still did a great job, and they had their suspect the whole time. They just needed a little bit of additional evidence, and thankfully, we were able to partner with this lab and bring some closure to that family. Anything else? All
Well,
right.
so you guys had DNA from the crime scene, correct?
Yes.
Alright, and then you guys weren't able to obtain DNA from him?
No. With the company, we also reached out to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and they were able to help assist us with getting the DNA from the suspect's siblings. And through that, that's how we were able to make a match. All right, well, that's going to conclude. I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank Ted Lewis for coming out today. And I hope to be standing in front of you all very soon as we continue to work and be dedicated to solving all crime in Kinston. Thank you so much. Thank y'all for being here. Thank y'all.